Hello and welcome to College World. If you have been stayed updated with our tutorials, you know that we're already in the second chapter of C3 tutorials. Now, the first chapter was regarding algebraic functions. We spoke about what a function is in like a general overview, and we knew how to deal with fractions if they were functions instead of just numerical values. So this will actually lead us on to our second chapter, because our second chapter is about functions in general. Now, in this chapter, we're not going to be discussing fractions. We're going to be talking about what a function is. We want to understand what it is, what makes a function special, when do we regard something as a function and when do we not. We want to understand it in depth. And then we're going to learn about things and aspects of functions, one of which is called the domain. We're going to discuss what a domain is and how we could find it and its importance. And then we're going to do the same for the range, which is also related to a function and the domain. From then on, we can move on from simple functions to something called composite functions, which are simply more complex forms of functions, but not complex enough to make you lose your A star. And then after discussing complex functions, how to solve questions regarding them, and the science behind them, we can move on to another complex thing, which is the inverse functions. Now, as you see, the word actually explains itself. We're going to get the inverse of a function. How we do that and its importance and the type of questions you can you encounter with them is what we will be discussing in this tutorial. And then this would leave us with the last part, where we're going to be giving you the tips and tricks. Now, this chapter isn't difficult, but the questions can be tricky. They need extra thinking, etc., etc. And one of the most important tips will be practice, practice, practice. So yes, stay tuned and follow all these objectives today in order to ace this chapter too. So let us start with the first part of the tutorial. So what it is. As we mentioned before in the past tutorial, we spoke about functions as a relationship. And we said it's a relationship between our x and our y. So we have an x and a y, and we're relating them to each other somehow. Now, this is what we're going to be doing here. It's a relationship between x and y. We have an equation that will lead us to values of where values of x would lead us to values of y. Now, I'm gonna go to a new page here and show you 3 different examples. So let us separate the screen, split the screen into 3 parts and discuss them. So first of all, there is something called mapping, and this is how we illustrate functions. So we're going to have here an x and a y, and we're going to put here some sort of cloud, and here the same thing. Now, if we do this in every part, we're going to be discussing 3 different equations, which are going to introduce you to the types of functions and actually the science behind functions and things you need to know about functions. So here we go. First of all, these clouds are going to represent the relationships between x's and y's in different equations. In our first equation, let us say equation is y equals to 1 over x. And then in our second one, we're going to say y equals to 3x squared. And then the last one will be y equals to radical x. Now let us put let's actually put numbers. So we'll have some negative and some positive. So 0, 1, negative 1. And then our y is going to be hence negative 1. It's going to be, this is not going to lead to anything, and our 1 is going to stay 1. Now, if we want to, okay, let's do this everywhere first. Oops, this is supposed to be negative 1. So yeah, negative 1, 0, 1. It's going to be 3, it's going to be here 3, and this is going to be 0. Now, if we do this here too, we're going to have here no value. Our 0 is going to lead to 0, and our 1 is going to lead to 1. Now, if we want to show this relationship, the way we're going to draw it is arrows from x to y. X to y. Now, this 0 is not leading anywhere, so there's no arrow from it, and we're going to be doing this, this, and this. Now, no matter how many numbers you have on the x and y, it's going to be the exact same thing. So, this is called mapping. Mapping is just drawing two clouds and you're mapping a certain number of x onto your y, which leads to the relationship we know. Now, what we see here is that we don't care if an x does not lead anywhere. We just don't count it. But what we need to know is we need to know how many arrows are coming out of each. Now, I want to redraw this because here we actually have 3 twice. So the way we can actually redraw it is we can have our cloud here as -1, 0, 1, and on the other side we can have a 0 and a 3 because we do not repeat numbers inside our cloud. And if we want to redraw the relationship, we're going to have our -1 lead to 3 and our 1 lead to the same 3 while our 0 leads to the other 0. Now, what do you see here? We want to look at the arrows. We see that here every one leads to another one, and this is how it goes. So we call this a one-to-one function. Now, if we do this here, we're going to notice that it's actually many can lead to one, and this is called a many-to-one function. Then, if we look here, we will find that it's if we do this, let's say actually we're gonna actually have a -1 here because radical x it can be a radical 4 can give you -1 or 1, and radical 1 can give you 1 or -1 because this is how the radical is actually, and this is the actual diagram for it. So if we want to do it, we'll see that one can lead to many, so it's called one-to-many function. Now, a one-to-many function is not a function because the definition of a function is a relationship between x and y where each value of x leads to one and only one value of y. So your end has to be 1. So this is not a function. Now, if you want to draw a graph of this, the graph for radical x is going to be something like this, where your graph is going to look like this, and one value of x can lead to more than one values of y, and this is why it's not a function. You have y1 and you have y2. Now, if we want to draw this here, it's going to actually be a parabola. Now, our parabola here is going to have each value of x a value of y can lead to more than one x, and this is alright as long as the x leads to one value of y. Similarly, if we do it for here, for 1 over x, our graph is going to look like this and this. Here, every single value of x leads to one and only one value of y. So this is only 1, 1, 1, etc. So this is why it's a one-to-one function, and to us this is the ideal function, and this is how it goes. Now, as you see here, the 0 has no value, but this is alright. As we said, we don't care if it leads nowhere as long as it doesn't lead to multiple places, as long as it's not one-to-many. In this case, what we say is 0 is outside our domain, so our x is actually our domain, and our range is and our y is called the range. Now, in the next part of the tutorial, we'll get in depth of that. But what we need to know now is the general definition of a function as a relationship between x and y where each value of x leads to one and only one value of y, and it can exist in two forms, one-to-one and many-to-one. And that would be the general definition of a function and the general types of